watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Hi, we're from LA. You're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So today is Saturday, March 29th, and it is around 5 o'clock p.m. where I'm at right now. It's a couple hours before the highly anticipated Bradley versus Pacquiao first episode of 24/7 comes on. I'm also looking forward to this Kareem Mayfield versus Tomas Delarme, and of course the Sergey Kovalev fight. I truly believe that the Kareem Mayfield fight should have been the main event. That's the main fight I really want to watch. I'm not too interested in the Kovalev fight because he's fighting against a bum. But anyway, back to the subject at hand. Tim Bradley made some very interesting points in his most recent interview in regards to his next opponent, Manny Pacquiao. The article is titled, "When was the last time Pacquiao had a knockout?" So I'm going to go ahead and read a big chunk of this article, and then after that, I'll give you guys my thoughts on what Tim Bradley, actually said about Manny Pacquiao. Here we go. Well, when was the last time you saw him knock somebody out? It's been a long time. Then he had a guy sitting in front of him. He was a tough guy, Brandon Rios. I have a lot of respect for, but he was right there in front of him and he couldn't get rid of him. He is supposed to be one of the most vicious punchers in the game. I have never seen Manny Pacquiao take a step back before. I think it was the last round of the Rios fight, and he had Rios trapped in a corner, and you saw Manny take his foot off the gas pedal. And it was unbelievable to me. In our fight, I had 2 wounded feet, and he couldn't take me out. What makes you think he can take me out with 2 good feet? I had 2 wounded feet, and that's when I start noticing I have the ability. Now, don't get it twisted as me saying he doesn't have the fire or passion. Manny Pacquiao used to come in blazing and knock guys out. Just knock them out, and he didn't mess around. Now it looks like he's more compassionate towards his opponents, and that's not good for boxing. End quote. Now, before I give you my thoughts on this interview that Tim Bradley just did, I want to address some of the most ignorant, silly-ass Manny Pacquiao fans. Now, this is not to suggest that it's all of them, but it is definitely the majority of them, at least if you read the comments. I just want to say, you Manny Pacquiao fans that act this way, you guys really need to grow up, man. Because this is the reason why people don't really take these type of fans serious. You know, there's a difference from a boxing fan and just a cheerleader. There's nothing wrong with rooting for the guy that you want to win. But when you see the most ridiculous, ignorant messages in the comment section, it just makes the Manny Pacquiao fans look bad. I mean, doesn't it? I mean, think about it. If you guys go back and you watch the previous video I just did, Martinez versus Cotto, the breakdown, if you read all of the comments or read some of the comments, you'll notice that almost everyone on that comment section, they're actually making sense. They're talking with maturity. In other words, it sounds like they're actually talking about boxing. It's straight boxing talk. It's none of that ignorant shit. For example, you may hear one guy say, I think Cotto might take it because Sergio Martinez, he hasn't been looking too good lately, etc. And then you have another guy say, I think Sergio Martinez is going to win because he's so much bigger. And, Cotto is not a natural middleweight, etc., right? But those are how all of the comments went down. If I do a video about Deontay Wilder against another heavyweight, like maybe Deontay Wilder, let's say against Bermane Stiverne, I can guarantee you there will be no extremely ignorant ass messages, shut up, this and that, and playing the race card and all of this ridiculous shit. I can guarantee you, if we were talking about those type of fighters, you would look at the comment section and you would see strictly boxing talk, right? And just like the analogy that I made a long time ago, if you watch the NBA, one guy, his team may be the Lakers, this guy, his team may be the Celtics, etc., etc. But if you guys notice, you never really hear them, going to war, sending ignorant ass messages back and forth because this guy is not rooting for the same team that you root for. You know why you don't see that kind of bullshit in the NBA? Because the majority of those NBA players are the same color. So they don't really have, one person in particular that they want to really dedicate their emotions to like they do when it comes to Manny Pacquiao. And because of that, when it comes to Manny Pacquiao, you get the most ridiculous, ignorant messages because how dare you say that someone is going to beat this guy because he knows how to move to the left, because he has better head movement. How dare you pick over Manny Pacquiao, right? This is how they see it. And, as long as you guys keep acting like this, people will never take these Manny Pacquiao fans serious. People will always look at you guys as sideshow cheerleaders because that's what they act like, all right? So with that out the way, let's get back into this interview that Tim Bradley did. Now, like I told you guys before, I agree with some things that Bradley said. I disagree with some of the things that he said. I thought the first line in the interview made a lot of sense when Tim Bradley said, "When was the last time you saw him knock somebody out?" Tim Bradley, he brings up an interesting point for many reasons. For one reason is because you hear all of these fans, for whatever reason, casual, maybe dumbasses, maybe they know it's not true, but it just makes them feel good to say it. For whatever reason, you'll hear fans say, Tim Bradley or Manny Pacquiao is going to knock out Tim Bradley in 4 rounds, 5 rounds, or whatever the case may be. And the point simply is, when is the last time you've seen Manny Pacquiao knock someone out? And especially if you're just talking about knocking someone out, not a TKO, not, the corner stops it. When have you seen him knock someone out? It's been a long time. And it has never been against an opponent that fights like Tim Bradley, right? And another reason why this is an interesting point that Bradley brought up is because how often do we hear so many people talk about Manny Pacquiao's biggest nemesis, Floyd Mayweather, and what do they always say? They always say, when is the last time Floyd Mayweather knocked someone out? The whole thing when it comes to these knockouts is the fact that we haven't seen Pacquiao knock someone out in forever, and he's actually supposed to be known to knock people out. Just like Tim Bradley said in this interview, Pacquiao is supposed to be one of the most vicious punchers there is in the sport today. But yet, he's not getting any knockouts. Now, that's not a knock on Manny Pacquiao, just like that's obviously not a knock on Floyd Mayweather. What you guys have to understand is when you're fighting against tomato cans, journeymen, bums, etc., early on in your career, if you guys notice, the knockout ratio is often really high when you're coming up and you're fighting against tomato cans. Like Jose Ramirez right now, U.S. Olympian, boxer. He's a good fighter. Right now he's knocking everyone out, left and right. But that's because right now he's fighting tomato cans. Once he moves to the elite level, things will often be different. You know why it's so different? Because when you find those tomato cans, you could literally force the knockout. Even if the knockout is not really there, you could force the knockout because these guys are nowhere near on your level. They're actually there to almost be knocked out, right? But see, when you step up in competition, you can no longer force knockouts anymore. In fact, the only way you really get knockouts when you're on this level is by the huge mistakes that your opponent may make. In other words, when you're fighting on this level, you are looking for your opponent to basically assist you in knocking his ass out. You want him to participate. That's how you usually get the knockout when someone makes mistakes, right? But because you're fighting against elite opposition, these type of fighters, they seldomly make mistakes. So it's not just Manny Pacquiao, it's not Floyd Mayweather. I can guarantee you, if you look at the historical stats, you'll find out that once fighters moved up to the elite level, their knockout ratio dropped, okay? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Manny Pacquiao doesn't have a chance of knocking out Tim Bradley, because I definitely feel that Pacquiao has a better chance of knocking out Bradley than vice versa. No doubt about it. My only point is, when you get on this level, it is far more difficult to knock out your opponents. That's the only point that I'm making. Another excellent point that Tim Bradley made was when Manny Pacquiao fought against Brandon Rios. Manny Pacquiao, if he is such a devastating puncher, he had the perfect opponent in the ring with him to display his punching power, right? He had a walking punching bag in the ring. A guy who didn't have the defense, a guy who didn't have the speed, the agility, the head movement to get out of the way of punches, who just stood there and was ready to get hit, okay? And Manny Pacquiao still could not knock him out. Now, to Manny Pacquiao's defense slightly, I will say that Brandon Rios, he did fight a more defensive fight. Even though he was getting caught a lot, Brandon Rios was still very cautious in that fight. He was trying his best not to get knocked out, okay? But the point still remains is Manny Pacquiao, he was in there with the type of style that, he was supposed to get the guy out of there, and he could not do it. All right. So if he couldn't get out a guy who got hit with, 1,000 punches around, how is he going to knock out a guy who doesn't get hit 1,000 times around? If you know what I mean. Not only that, but another good point that Tim Bradley brought up is, if Pacquiao couldn't knock out Tim Bradley, a guy who the fans say has no power at all, right? And Tim Bradley is sitting there with 2 injured ankles, and he's standing right in front of Manny Pacquiao at least 80% of the fight. If Manny Pacquiao couldn't knock him out at Tim Bradley's worst, please tell me, how does it logically make sense that Manny Pacquiao has a better chance of knocking out Tim Bradley when he's at his best, when he is going to be mobile? I mean, like I said, go back and watch the fight. Tim Bradley was standing in front of Manny Pacquiao almost the whole night. I said in a recent interview that the most moving that Tim Bradley did was in the last 3 rounds. But since then, I've watched that fight a couple times. Like I said, I like to watch it while I'm working out in the house, just because that's one of the biggest fight, I believe, of the year right now. But anyway, I went back and watched those rounds, and I realized, I said, wait a minute, Tim Bradley is not even running. In the 10th round, Tim Bradley starts off the round pushing Pacquiao back. And then after about a minute, then Tim Bradley, he gets back to boxing. He starts moving to his left again. But as Tim Bradley is boxing, he's actually not even on the run. He's not on his bicycle. He's just walking around the ring. Okay? He's walking around the ring. So, the point, of course, again, is if Pacquiao couldn't knock out Tim Bradley with 2 injured ankles, I see it as very difficult for him to do in the rematch. It is very possible. And sometimes Tim Bradley does get too aggressive. I don't know how much of that we can attribute to the fact that he was just sitting there and he had no feet to move around. But he was definitely a little too stationary in that first fight. They could definitely cost him, and he could possibly get knocked out, okay? Now let me tell you some of the things that I did not agree with when it comes to Tim Bradley's assessment. And I guess when it comes to this one thing, I won't even say I don't agree. I'll just say, obviously, Tim Bradley, he didn't notice this. But Tim Bradley, he said, in the Brandon Rios fight, that was the first time I seen Manny Pacquiao take a step back. That was completely inaccurate for Tim Bradley to say that, because Manny Pacquiao has took steps back and moved around the ring in numerous fights prior to the Brandon Rios fight. The most noticeable and recent time Manny Pacquiao did it was against Antonio Margarito. We've seen Manny Pacquiao get on his bicycle in that fight, throughout this fight. Now, I got to let you guys know that this video was originally 18 minutes, but this iPad will only let me do 15 minutes, so I'll extend it later. I'm on to the next.